Welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I am David Ito, Chief Instructor of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles. And with me is...
Ken Watanabe.
And Bill D'Angelo. This is a big topic. Atemi in Aikido.
Atemi, like striking people?
Like striking people.
Like hitting people?
Maybe, or we can define it. But you're right. I think a lot of people, when they think Atemi and Aikido, they think of the strike. I think that's what people think.
Yeah, they think that Atemi is hitting people.
Right.
But Atemi is much, much more than just hitting people.
But how would you redefine it from the common misperception?
Well, I'll read you Fu Sensei's definition.
All right. That'd be great.
Atemi has more uses in Aikido technique than simply to strike the opponent. We use Atemi to correct our spacing and to break the concentration and balance of our opponent in order to throw or pin the opponent more easily.
That last part, I think, is really important.
Yeah, so it's more than just a strike. And some of it's not even you Atemi, but you don't actually make contact with the person's body.
Right.
But I mean, if we go back, like, what is the Japanese definition of Atemi?
If you look at the kanji, the first kanji for Atemi is ataru, meaning to strike. So as part of a word, it's ate. And the kanji for mi is your body. So it means striking the body, literally.
Plain meaning.
Plain meaning.
But how far back does Atemi go? Usage and all that.
I would imagine Atemi first started when people started fighting each other. You would have to say. I
read somewhere that in the Atemi in Jiu-Jitsu, traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, can be traced back, into like the Sengoku period, but I'm not 100% sure of that. And so you wonder if that Aikido finds its origins with Shinra Saburo Yoshimitsu, right? And that he supposedly, we talked about this in another podcast, he went through the battlefield afterwards and looked at people's bodies and how the muscles and tendons and bones were connected. He looked at how the armor helped or did not help people when they were attacked. And that supposedly from that that's where the idea of Atemi came from. That you're not just punching someone in the stomach who's wearing full armor. That doesn't work. You might not be able to punch them in the face, but you're striking them to create an opening. Yeah,
opening, like Furia Sensei said, to unbalance them, break their focus.
See, what I think is interesting, like I think Furia Sensei's definition and what you both are saying is spot on, but I keep coming back to what I think people think it means, which is you can do Atemi instead of a technique. Like I see that online all over the place, and they're saying, well, if you did the right Atemi, you wouldn't even, that would end it right there. But that doesn't sound like what we're talking about.
No, I mean, that is true.
That is completely true. In place of a throw or pin, if you move in strong enough with your whole body and make contact, that's it.
Well, you got to remember, though, Aikido today is very flowing and dynamic, right? They don't mechanically create kuzushi, unbalancing the person, right? Yeah. In the old days, the movement was very static. So if you watch old footage of a judo or jiu-jitsu, it's very like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, it's very mechanical.
B, C, D, and then they break their opponent's balance mechanically. Like a judo person, they pull the person in, lift them up, and then they throw. Aikido people today don't do that. You use timing and spacing to unbalance the person and throw them down.
But you could do both.
But in the old days, the movement wasn't dynamic, right? It was very static, and then a person grabbed your wrist, they built a grip, and then you broke the grip, and then you threw them, right? And how did they break the grip? They used Atemi.
Right.
Right? And Atemi's not just punching someone in the nose, right? You, as Furia Sensei said, you attack them, and it moves them, unbalances them physically and psychologically.
Yes.
Right? So we're not just kicking people in the nuts or punching them in the nose. That's very low level.
Right.
the sophistication of a Atemi is that it's striking a vital point which creates an opening.
So on like Shomanuchi Ikkyo, like what would be an example of a Atemi that works the way you just described?
The Atemi for Ikkyo in the old days was this nakidake, where you would punch
Floating
the person
ribs.
in the floating rib.
Right.
So as you moved in, you would strike them with this underhanded, palm facing up nakidake fist, and then the knuckle is supposed to go between the ribs, and then when that person goes and feels it, you take their elbow and then take them down. If you look at a lot of the Atemis in this dojo, I don't know about other dojos or other Aikido places, Sensei used nakidake, the middle finger pointed up,
Right.
And someone told me, I don't know how true this is that because it's supposed to resemble dagger, a push dagger you hold in this hand, and that you would stab someone in the vital spot with this nakidake fist, this little nub that's. But the whole idea is that you're going to strike this person to unbalance them.
Right.
So you have to hit them in a vital spot. So you just can't hit them any old place.
Because you need a specific response.
Right.
Right.
To create a specific attack with a specific Atemi that creates a specific response.
And I know sometimes both of you show this in class, that there you might show an older form of a technique and how it evolved from what appear to be more direct strikes into, as you were saying, a flowing type practice. Is there a longevity component? Because both of you, I've seen you teach techniques where it's maybe some form of riminage or kokinage where your arm is circling over and crossing the jaw or the neck, and the older form might have a more direct smash with the elbow, and then the more evolved form allows the person to take easier ukemi.
Well, it's done that way because people, for one, in the old days didn't know how to take ukemi, and two, the attacks were static.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
And so you'd have to like on Tenkan Kokyu-ho, when your arm would come up, you would just naturally strike them in the side of the jaw, which would force them. Which would break their balance, and then you could throw them.
Right.
But I mean, Atemi is one of those things that they don't really use it today because it's supposedly it's been evolved out of the movement because the movement is more dynamic. To strike Atemi slows the movement down or stops the movement altogether.
So do you think that for most Aikido techniques now, it's like an archaic vestige?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Do you? I mean,
I'm not so sure that's true, but I see where this might be going.
As you try to like really understand this idea of Atemi, my question that I've been truly thinking about the other day is that is there Atemi? Not just strikes. Is there Atemi in other styles of martial arts?
Some martial arts are all Atemi, like karate, kung fu, kempo.
I don't. But that's not the
Is
same
that what you're
thing,
talking about?
though.
Are you talking about like judo?
No, but I mean, like an Atemi is a strike to a vital point, which creates an opening for a technique. So I mean, karate, yes, I guess you could see it from that standpoint, but that standpoint is more offensive, like overwhelming your opponent with strikes. Atemi is a well-placed hit which creates an opening for a technique. So, I mean, if you look at karate, are they Atemiing the person in order to move in to do another technique? Like, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. They're either striking, they're either blocking / striking the attacking hand to like break the attacking fist, or they're following up to finish the opponent.
And like in judo, there's no striking because it's a competitive sport.
It's a competitive sport.
I'm trying to remember the kata, the exam katas for judo, and they're stylized. And I just can't remember. I'm trying to think in my mind.
They're like kime no kata and the goshin jutsu no kata.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of throws where it ends in an atemi, where you throw them and then you elbow them down,
Right.
or you kick them, you hit them in a vital spot. But that's basically to finish them off.
Right.
But
Not to move
you're
them.
talking about Atemi in a way that it facilitates the use of a technique.
Right. Like if you look, I don't know that much about Japanese jiu-jitsu, but you try to think, is there a Atemi? Because most Japanese jiu-jitsu just looks like judo.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at really old like jiu-jitsu where they have those little tables, like sometimes they'll take the table and hit the person with the table and then just like it looks like just really, really archaic. Like you just take the sambo, you like hit them in the face with it, you
Then
grab their top knot and you pull them down, pull out your dagger and you stab them. Like that was jiu-jitsu back then.
That reminds me a lot of like the Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. Daito Aiki Jiu-Jitsu has a lot of Atemi in it.
Well, and theirs looks very like stop motion.
Right,
The
mechanical.
person, like ha ha, and then they do all that stuff. But I mean, just trying to understand this idea that like the sophistication of Aikido, that you're going to strike a vital spot which creates an opening to do a technique.
I think the other thing that you said really resonates with me is that if you can do the Atemi in the right way, in the right spacing, then you're in the right place to execute the technique. So even beyond like what effect it has on the uke, like if you're like too close and you can't get a good shot in, or if you're too far away and you can't reach, like those are all things that tell you as the nage how to like train yourself in being in the right spot to do the right technique.
But I mean, like, if you think about like, do you use a lot of Atemi in your technique?
When I throw, I know in every Aikido technique there is a hidden Atemi.
But do you use Atemi in your technique?
Usually, I do not, unless the technique specifically calls for Atemi, like Gyakuhanmi Tenchinage, where you come up and strike with the back of your fist, and then you come over. But that technique, like there's a Atemi.
No, but do you in your own technique? Do you employ Atemi?
Depends on the technique. But most of the time, I do not. But the spirit of Atemi is in the movement.
I think it's sometimes how we practice too, because back in the day, and I hate to say that, but it is kind of back in the day, for Shomanichi Ikkyo Arimi style, or even Tenkan, if you look at older forms of Aikido, you see often the nage striking first, and then the uke gets their arm up in the right position for the technique to be done. And I think that's interesting because there's sort of this folk belief that in Aikido is all a counterattack, but it's not always a counterattack.
No, it's not supposed to be.
It's not supposed to be.
If you look at like karate, traditional karate, karate is only for defense, so you have to be struck. But then people have turned it into this idea of offense. Aikido is the same thing. That Aikido is defensive. Well, it's not defensive and offense is not really a word we should use, but it is balanced both offensive and defensive. But we do not wait, right? It's go no sen means you wait to be struck, correct? Sen no sen means you move before you're struck. And then Aikido is supposed to be sen no sen. You move before you're struck, before the person even realizes that they're supposed to strike. Right. That's the timing.
That's the timing.
Sen no sen.
It's the same. It's like the swordsmanship timing. When they hit you, I'm supposed to hit them. But instead of hitting them, you irimi, tenkan, tenchin, get into position to do the technique.
But I mean, if you like in my own technique, it's I think about the Atemi the whole time.
Yeah.
When I'm moving in, I go, this is where I would have put the Atemi.
Right.
But I just don't show it because I don't show the Atemi lots of times because it's people fall in love with that stuff. And then they're punching the person in the face and you're like, no.
Because they think it's easy or
everybody, they want
It's just easy. It's hitting somebody is easier than catching their timing, aligning with their energy,
100%.
Reading their power. So it's always easy to just slap someone upside the head.
Right. So from a training perspective, that's almost too simple. Whereas if you always rely on that, you won't be able to develop the technique.
Yeah, because if we show them, they may never leave there.
They never leave it. But a lot of times I'll show the Atemi because a lot of times, let's say in a lot of katate tori gyakuhami techniques where you're grabbing the same side, the side that's not being grabbed, it's always like there's no energy in there.
Right.
So a lot of times you employ an Atemi on that side to engage the side that's not being attacked.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you're using your whole body. So a lot of times you would Atemi just to channel your focus forward.
I never thought about it from that point of view because they say the idea is the power is round. So if I have my arms out like this, the power is emanating from the center of this outward.
Yeah.
So if I move in if I do a technique with just my left hand, my right hand ends up being passive and then the power is too one-sided.
Yeah.
So you Atemi, what you're saying is that you Atemi to create the roundness of the power is not the right word, but
Just to complete the power.
Yeah,
Complete the ring of power.
and it make it more expansive.
So, for example, like we're talking about Shomenuchi Ikkyo. We don't Atemi the rib cage because you don't have the time. But when you advance forward, your front hand is blocking your head, but the hand that's not engaged with the striking hand, it still comes forward with as much energy as the hand that you think is the hand that does the work.
Right.
The hand that does the work is the hand that breaks the elbow. So you're trying to you're trying to hit, then break your opponent's elbow. But because they want to protect their elbow, then they bend it.
Right.
Then that facilitates Ikkyo.
So that brings up this idea that what you're saying is that when you move in, you change their offense into defense because they went to strike you and then now they have to block you.
I guess what I'm saying is when I move in, I'm moving in with both my active side and my inactive side. So both sides are actually
engaged.
Right.
No, but I mean, you were saying that they have to now block.
Block for like Ikkyo?
And then that's how you take Ikkyo. Because that's what you were saying. Like,
like break their elbow?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like their elbow either gets broken or damaged or they bend it to like protect it.
So that's what I'm saying. Like they go from being offensive, they're attacking you, to now having to
I
protect
see what you mean. Yeah, like what Sensei said, to like you change their attacking mind to a defending mind. Mm-hmm. So you actually kind of like mentally put them on the ropes. They're like, oh shoot, I have to do something. So instead of thinking about bashing their head in, they're worried about not getting their elbow broken.
So there's like a philosophical underpinning of a.
There's a psychological aspect to the Atemi, both for the nage and for the uke.
But is it philosophical? I mean, does it have a philosophical basis that, because like you think about this idea that the reason why Aikido techniques are the way they are is because an Aikidoist is supposed to be a sophisticated, civilized person who comes to realize that everyone suffers.
Okay.
And that this person who is attacking you is not attacking you. They're attacking you to vent out their frustrations, anger, sadness, whatever it is. And so you do the technique on them to change their minds so that they will realize the error of their ways. Right? And so by changing them from offense to defense, like you are like living out the philosophical understandings of O-sensei's Aikido.
I don't know if I think about it that far. To me, it's you change their mind so then you can do the technique on them. Like they're not attacking you. We're not attacking each other. There's not a stalemate. You change their psychology. So all of a sudden, instead of thinking about doing you harm, they're thinking about protecting themselves. So at first we were thinking about, I got to protect myself against this attacker.
Like self-defense.
Self-defense. But Aikido is, in the broadest sense, it is self-defense. But you're changing the psychology of the attacker from an offensive mindset to a defensive mindset. Like all of a sudden, like they have to worry about protecting themselves.
So I mean, I think both of you are getting this idea that there's this. I don't know if the right word is philosophical, but I think both of you are hitting on a psychological aspect of the technique, and you're saying that Aikido has this reputation as being self-defense first, and what I think both of you are saying is there's a way in which the Atemi and the technique work together to make Aikido a higher type of practice, where the type of practice is about impacting people's levels of violence, even their morality. Like if you can get someone to give up violence, like that's the victory, right? As you get someone to change their violent mindset.
Yeah, I mean, you studied, Greek, Roman, the literature and all this stuff. Do they talk about stuff like that?
It's interesting. I mean, specifically for the Greeks, there's such a competition or organized society that everything is competition, from beauty contest to athletic to combat. Like if there are two people in a moment and they're Greek, the first thing they're thinking is, how do we compete? What do we compete on? Who can win? Who can lose?
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, the Athenians had male and female beauty contests. They had music competitions. They had writing competitions. They had dramatic competitions. And then every year in a different city, there were Olympic-type competitions. The Olympics was just every 4 years, but the other 3 odd years, there were different festivals doing exactly the same thing the Olympics did in other locales. But to get to your point, I think the difference, with the Hellenic point of view was they wanted to compete on everything, and they wanted to prove their superiority over their opponent in every aspect of life. If you could think of something, they competed about it. So I think it's very different than the Aikido mentality. Like for example, if you look at these festival fighting competitions, there were just 3 things. There was pankration, which was like no rules, no holds barred. There was boxing, and then there was wrestling. And they used to conceive of the pankration as a combination of the wrestling, which we would think of as grappling, and boxing, which we would think of as striking. So I think going even to a deeper level, they separated out the striking art from the grappling art in competition.
When you say philosophical, do you mean in terms of right and wrong, or the reason behind using Atemi?
Well, I'm just saying, because we think about this idea that you don't see Atemi in a lot of other martial arts, especially other Japanese arts, right? So if you think about, if you read Junichi Haga's book on Kendo, he talks about he opens up every attack with ski. And he says that 70% of the time it never works. But the ski opens up the opportunity for another attack. But he opens up every attack with ski, right? So this idea of using Atemi to open up your opponent, but then Atemi slows the movement down. So I mean, we think about philosophy and why did O Sensei have because what's the famous quote?
What is it, like Aikido is 90% Atemi?
Atemi.
Like the percentage changes all the time, right? It seems like it changes all the time.
People say 80, people say 90, but I really don't think that O Sensei, being the type of person he is, is saying 80%.
Yeah, he was a pure artist. He wasn't a numbers guy.
So he wouldn't be using, but I mean, the word pasento is a Japanized Western term.
Yeah.
Right? So he wouldn't be like 80%. He probably, I don't know, they don't even use that. They may not, percentage is a very fictitious use in the West.
Yeah.
But maybe in old Japan, they wouldn't say that, right? So, but I mean, yes, we could say a large majority of Aikido is Atemi, but why was the Atemi used if it's not used in other, if you don't see it pop up in other martial arts?
I don't have both of yours experience, but I think that what might be at the basis of that comment, whether it's 80, 90, or just the majority, is there's something about a properly done Atemi, as you might say, that's the technique's already over. if you've done it correctly, it sets up the situation such that the person who attacked, who now receives the Atemi, it's almost like you don't need to finish doing it because it's done in a way. But that seems very philosophical to me.
For me, when I think about Atemi, like for example, like maybe when you think about doing kokudosa in a technique, since you used to always say do kokudosa as you slide in and come up to their face as if striking it, or when you do like the ikkyo from katete tori, like since you used to demonstrate the hand that sandwiches the top hand comes up and you backhand the guy's face. He used to say both hands go towards your opponent's face. Essentially, like you're controlling your opponent's center line. So I think a lot of times they use Atemi as a way to focus the movement on the right alignment, depending on the movement. So the Atemi was not just to strike or to hurt the person, but also to, when you come towards your opponent's center line, you occupy that center line. It's very hard for them to counterattack you because you have their hand in your face.
Right.
You have your hand blade in their face. So the spirit of Atemi is there
All the time.
all the time, and you actually move with an Atemi-like energy. So at the same time, it's smooth. There's this percussive energy to it. Then, instead of hitting the target, you pass the target and come down to ikkyo. So it's like a hidden. There's the energy of the strike is there, but you're still doing this big soft circle. So there's a hard element in the movement, and there's a softer element in the movement, like the flowing element of the movement. You're still flowing, but there's a hard element in there as well, which is the Atemi portion of the movement.
But I mean, like if you're, like we think about this idea of philosophy, the philosophy of the philosophy of Atemi is that it holds the spirit of the technique within the movement.
I believe so, yeah. It holds the spirit and it focuses. It's the martial aspect of the movement as opposed to just an empty movement. It's a martial aspect. So if you make an error, the person lets go, you still have the center line. So your opponent can either let go and lose a connection, but you still have the connection through the Atemi. In other words, the path of your hand is an Atemi-like path, but it's incorporated into the Aikido movement.
But so then what you're saying is that
It's like insurance.
But so the movement of Aikido is yin and yang. The yang being the Atemi, the yin being this thing that we just don't do it. We don't do the Atemi, but it has to be there in order for it to be yin yang.
Yeah, it has to, like the spirit has to be there. Like when Yoshida Sensei taught, he would say the path of the hand, on the way to the end, there's an Atemi there someplace.
Is there a Atemi in every technique?
To me, I think there's a potential Atemi in every technique. Even like when you irimi in, it's as if you're like thrusting in and like thrusting them at their side. Like if you do tsuki versus tsuki, the timing is he hits me, I hit him. Except when he hits me, he misses me because I turn my body as I strike my opponent. So there's like a offensive, like you said, there's not pure offensive, not pure defensive. There's an offensive aspect to the defensive movement, and there's a defensive aspect to an offensive movement. Is that what you're talking about? Like you say, yin yang.
Yeah. Well, that it has to be, the spirit of the Tai Chi symbol, right? The yin and yo is that there's a dot of black in the white, and there's a dot of white in the black.
Yeah.
That perhaps this idea that you can't have a purely defensive movement. There has to be a drop of
offense
offense,
in there.
and you can't have a purely offensive movement. There has to be a drop of defense.
Yes.
If we use offense defense for lack of a better understanding. So then that's where this idea that since every movement is based on the sword or on weapons work, then every movement should have this idea of striking, attacking, even though you do that thing that you talk about, that mutual missing.
Yeah. Like, for example, like when you tenchin, you know how we used to like strike the face as we tenchin? You know, that's just to focus our power forward instead of like completely like try to run away. Like, you don't need that, Atemi. Like, if you're completely trained, you can tenchin and still have a very strong focus forward. But for beginners, they might need like a physical manifestation of forward by sticking their hand out as they tenchin and they come to the side as they fade back. So sometimes you need the Atemi as like a physical manifestation of your focus forward. But if once you're trained, you don't need that the training wheels of an Atemi. You're already mentally attacking as you fade back.
So, to make this a little bit more concrete, what are some examples of Atemi, like let's say for ski or for Yokomanuchi? What would the appropriate, and I guess it may vary by the technique responding, but for ski or for Yokomanuchi, how do you, both of you, analyze what the proper Atemi are?
Well, we have to know you have to, it's too difficult to do it like that. You have to say like, how do you do ski tenshin? Where's the Atemi?
Okay.
Right? Because the thing is that the attack and the person attacks you, their movement as they attack you dictates which Atemi you're going to use.
Right.
Yes.
You can't just use any old Atemi, because if their body's aligned a certain way, it's a certain Atemi.
So if we're talking about Yokomanuchi and different types of Atemi and what they would be, what would the Atemi be for Yokomanuchi, where we're entering omote style, or whether we're tenchin or moving back in a ura style?
Whether you do it going forward or backward, you still use the Atemi to control the center line.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was going to move forward to catch the striking hand as they're about to strike, I would make a play for their face and then come out and check their arm as my other hand comes up and strikes their face. And that's just to keep them from turning on me and to occupy the other hand and to keep them unbalanced. Or if I was going to tenchin backwards, as I cut down the hand that was striking, I would cut down on their neck. And that's just to change their psychology, and also that's just to keep my focus going forward, as opposed to like running away from the technique, running away from their attack.
Yeah, and also you irimi or move in or tenshin and move back, and you Atemi to slow or disturb their forward momentum.
Yes.
Right, because Yokomanuchi, they're moving forward. There's all this forward momentum.
Yeah.
You can't take the brunt of that, so
No.
you stop them from. If you go forward, you're stopping them with your irimi movement and your strike to maintain the proper spacing and meter the speed. Same thing with you tenshin, go backwards. You strike the face to slow down or give attention to the strike, so that their strike loses power.
So there's something interesting I think about Yokomanuchi from both of you, the way you're talking about it, and my recollection of how we practice it. With Yokomanuchi for either omote or tenshin style, we do an Atemi in class, usually, of some form, on that particular technique.
Right, and like most people don't, but if you bring back this idea that Watanabe Shihan was talking about, this idea that giving the Atemi on the opposite hand creates this balance in your movement.
Yes.
Right, and then it helps round out the energy. It helps expand the energy. That if you just step back and attack the hand, you run the risk of becoming unbalanced.
Yes. And when you're unbalanced, you're probably going to fall down.
Right.
So you need this. I used to do this thing on Yokonuchi where I used to just hit and just knock them down to the floor. Because they didn't have an Atemi that, like you said, slowed down my momentum. Because if I see a hand coming out, I'll think twice about like committing fully to the attack at the last second. It'll change my timing.
Right. I have a follow-up question just thinking about this. We were talking earlier, both of you were talking earlier in the podcast, how Aikido has this sophisticated flow to it, and the Atemis get they disappear. What would be an example? Because we talked about Yokonuchi both entering and retreating, having, like, I remember we do that, we use Atemi, but what are some of the flowing attacks / responses where Atemi generally gets elided out? Like, what's an example of that?
An example would be Sotomawari Kokunage, where you enter and then you enter again, your hand comes up just like Kokidosa, as if to strike your opponent's face.
But you don't.
You just have your hand there. And then after it's up, you would tenkang and then throw them forward. So that Atemi is to establish this connection between you and your opponent. Rather than let it slip, you would come up, strike the face, keep the pressure on the face as you turned, and then use that pressure to throw them down.
So I think like a good follow-up question to that is, why is Atemi not really used today? In general practice,
it's not really used today because we try to evolve it out of the movement, right? Like one of the reasons why they're trying to make it not so violent, but is it right for it not to be in the movement anymore?
I mean, I believe like the spirit of Atemi should be in the Aikido movement, whether you actually make contact or not. But the line of movement in relation to your opponent, there's an Atemi-like aspect to it, even though you're not like hitting them.
But I don't
know if that's a good explanation.
No, but why isn't it used today? I mean,
I want to say maybe like the teacher doesn't know.
No, because if you think about this, if a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy is just a black piece of paper, but that the movement, as it comes over from Japan, it becomes too violent for people, right? Because now you're going bam in the nose, you're punching them in the liver, you're punching them in the rib cage, and people are just kind of like, dude, I'm gonna quit. So the teacher goes, oh, I probably shouldn't do that. So the teacher accentuates spacing and timing to create the throws, and then they no longer use the Atemi. But there's just this idea that Atemi is any form of violence is violence.
Yes.
So if you're trying to learn this whole idea of Sensei's non-violent philosophical understanding of the Indian principle of ahimsa, any violence is still violence. And so you evolve the Aikido technique to not have this violence. But the idea is that just BS? The point I'm making is that, like, so people who do it like more Iwama style, right? There's more Atemi, right? And then some people say that there's this difference between Iwama Aikido and Aikikai Tokyo Aikido. Aikikai Tokyo Aikido has less Atemi. Iwama has more Atemi. So, like, they're trying to understand. Like, that's why I say, is this BS? Because you say, like, oh no, I don't use Atemi because philosophically, any violence is violence. Or is that just the reason, just some BS reason why we don't use Atemi? So, like, why isn't Atemi? What do you think about Atemi?
I would think people don't want to use Atemi because Aikido is like the art of peace, and any kind of violence, like you said, is violence. So you're supposed to accept the attack, redirect it, and then throw them down in a gentle way. There's no inherent martialness to the
Well,
to the attack,
that's
to the
what
technique.
that's the party line of modern Aikikai Aikido is that we don't do those things because it's about violence, right? But then this Aikido is a martial art.
Yeah,
right?
Aikido is a
And then
martial art.
instead of Atemi like this with a back fist, today people put up their hand. Oh, stop. But like in the real world, you probably going to have to use Atemi,
Yes.
right? So then, like with this idea, like it is the idea today is that it is not used because it has been evolved out of the movement. But is that true? Is it true? Did it get evolved out because of a philosophical idea? Is Aikido the art of peace, as John Stevens has us to believe? Right? That like, why is Atemi not there anymore?
Do you mean, Sensei, in Aikido in general in America? Because as I'm sitting here thinking of techniques that we do in class, especially in beginner class, there's some form of Atemi in a good number of the techniques. And like, I mean, I don't think, at least here, that we've stopped using Atemi. We don't use it in every technique but it's different.
But that's the thing is that to use Atemi, you lose flow, right? And so but if you look at most places, the Atemi is just not there in the Aikido anymore.
Yeah.
So trying to understand, like, why do you think it's not there today?
I think it's the philosophy.
You think it's because people are making it less of a martial art?
They're buying into this idea that the art of peace means not hurting other people.
So then they're taking out all the martial aspect of Aikido.
It's like
out of
moving
Aikido.
Meditation,
Yeah.
moving yoga.
Which it really, Aikido is a martial art. So, but maybe they're not practicing it as a martial art. Maybe they're practicing it as, like you said, moving meditation or just flowing
Yoga,
like developing your ki training or something. Not really from a self-defense aspect. Like, what do I do if somebody grabs me, attacks me?
And let's say someone jumps out of the darkness, grabs your wrist. You didn't see it coming, so you didn't move with their movement. And then you find yourself in a static position with a person grabbing you, pulling you behind a dumpster.
Yeah.
So you can't flow. You'll try to do a technique, but the easiest way to maneuver that is to move with Atemi.
Yeah, to like unbalance them with a strike, and then you can do your technique.
But I mean, we do not teach Atemi as a line item in our curriculum. Maybe most people don't either. Is that wrong? See, this is something I struggle with all the time, thinking like, I really should just teach. I mean, I have a very decent knowledge of all the Atemi, and I go, maybe I should really be teaching Atemi more.
Usually, for me, when I teach a basic technique, if there's an Atemi involved, then I will always
show it.
I will always show it to them. So just so they know. Because a lot of times, let's say on like, if you're teaching on Ikkyo, do you have to Atemi? No, you could just flow and take Ikkyo. Or you can strike to establish a spacing, cut down, and then come forward toward their head.
But I mean, I get that's what you do.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that it's not used today, and are we going in the wrong direction?
I think we're going in the wrong direction by not having Atemi in there, or at least the spirit of Atemi. If you're going to do it as a martial art.
Spirit of Atemi is you're tiptoeing that line. Like, I'm not trying to put force you to say yes or no. I wonder out loud. I go, wow, am I teaching Aikido in a way in which, because if you teach the spirit and you don't put it in the movement, in a hard lined out way, the next generation goes, oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Oh, I think he said something in 1971 about that.
Oh,
I don't remember.
Is that what you're talking about? Like when you leave something out, it just gets lost.
It's out.
It's out. It's out forever because people don't even know about it.
Right, because only the prodigy, the genius goes, oh, there's an Atemi here, right?
Yeah.
But then that's the thing is, and then if Aikido is 80 or 90% Atemi, are we losing the martialness of Aikido?
Yeah, we are. I think we are.
So then, should we be bringing it back?
I don't think. I mean, in our dojo, Atemi's never left the room.
No, it's never left the room, but it's not in the movement. I would say 70% it is not in the movement. But I mean, personally, I don't need that Atemi. My movement, my positioning my body, positioning my footwork, I don't need Atemi. But then those people are not me.
No, they're not you.
And so maybe that's the thing. Like, should we be bringing it? Are we doing a disservice? Are people, teachers, other people, organizations doing a disservice because Atemi is not 80 or 90% of the movement?
I believe so.
So like you go, I'm not,
I mean, Atemi helps your positioning, focus. If you're accomplished, if you're an expert, you already have that focus and direction. The direction of your power is already established, so you don't need that physical manifestation of your concentration. You already have your positioning is good, your focus is correct, the way you align with your opponent is correct. So technically, you don't need Atemi.
But the thing is that if we don't teach the Atemi, like we said, like it will be, when it's gone, it will be forgotten.
I believe so, yes.
And only the prodigy or the genius will be able to figure out, oh, there's Atemi here, right?
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, there is? Yeah. Like the other day, someone said, hey, where's the Atemi in this technique? I go, oh, right here. And they go, how did you know that? I go, it's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
They go, did Free Sensei tell you that? And I go, no. It's just obvious to me.
Yeah, just obvious because the line of the movement, it could either be a throw or a strike or a wrist grab, or it's versatile.
But that's the thing, is that if you think about this idea, it is an archaic practice.
Yeah.
It is effective. There's an Atemi in every technique, but it's not taught that way anymore. Should it be there?
I wonder if there's an element to this too. Of Atemi has all these different meanings, as Furi Sensei said in the quote. But I think like if you're trying to develop high level teachers, for the teacher, there's an element of, if you want to be an expert in something, generally like in the West, you like learn the history of that thing as well as doing the thing. And I think what you're alluding to is there are aspects of Aikido that if you understand the theory of Atemi and then the actual application of it, attack by attack, your Aikido will be more sophisticated. I think that you're saying like Aikido's become more sophisticated, and so we don't have Atemi. But I think if you're going to be a senior teacher, you need to have some knowledge. You need to have as much knowledge as you possibly can about the art.
Yeah, but some people don't really want to know that.
Well, that's a whole different issue.
But I mean, but
I think if you're going to be a senior teacher and you want to understand something,
that is your definition.
I know,
right?
But I mean, I'm just responding to your question.
But I mean, that's why we're trying to ask this idea, like, should we be using Atemi in every technique? Should we be bringing it back? I don't really know. I mean, that's just trying to understand Atemi in Aikido,
right?
Not that Aikido we should be using Atemi. I might show the Atemi sometimes, but I don't do the Atemi physically. But my mind is always thinking Atemi.
Yeah.
But should we? Is it a responsible thing to not have it in there, or a responsible thing to not have it in there?
I think you should. I think the student should know where the Atemi is, because a lot of times the way the hand moves on the way to the end result of that movement, sometimes there's a Atemi hidden right there. Or like for when you Irimi for Shomenuchi, your front hand doesn't move, but your back hand comes forward as if to Irimi the rib cage, but it passes a rib cage, and then you cut down on your opponent's neck.
But people are coming in without any violence experience, so they don't know how to hit. No. So then now you got to go back to how you hit someone 101.
Yeah.
right? How you issue power 101. And then now you were trying to teach them Aikido. And then there's things, it's like I can see where you go, we just take out the strike because it's just too complicated. Because Aikido techniques already are super complicated.
Yeah, they're
with
very complicated.
or without the Atemi.
Yes, they are.
And then you're like, hey, now you're going to punch them right here. And then so what does everybody do? They just punch them right there. And then that goes, oh, it worked? And then they go, I don't want to ever leave that.
I think there's a martial question to it, which was already partially discussed, which is, we generally practice Aikido in some form of a modified kata, and so that it's unusual for us to do strike, counter strike, all in one training of the technique. And I think one reason why you probably really need to have an understanding of Atemi is if you're in a practical situation and the first go doesn't go your way, or you end up being grabbed a lot closer and you blew them an eye, like if you don't know what all the other options are, it might constrain your ability to respond, because you are going to miss them an eye sometimes. You are going to make a misstep. You might slip. The person might close faster than you thought they were closing. And to not have the full toolkit seems to me to be like, why wouldn't you want the full toolkit?
But it's just today, the growing sentiment is this fake, like you throw the person super hard and the person doesn't really, the person doesn't really attack you really hard.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you throw the person super hard, but then you would never Atemi them because that's impolite. But it's like,
that doesn't make sense.
But you just threw the person down on their head. Like, why would you made them take a break fall, but Atemiing them is impolite?
Yeah.
Is violent?
Yeah. Like you make them break fall, but you're not going to hit them.
But like when we were students, and like I do this Atemi on Tenchinage that I could swear Fuyu Sensei taught me. Right?
Which one is that one?
When you move in, you hit them in the sternum, bam,
Yes.
and then you cook you.
With the elbow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sensei taught us that, right?
Yeah, you hit them in the elbow, and then you can take your back fist and knock him in the face, and then your hand will go over there. That's, but
but the point I'm making is that one time I did that, and Sensei goes, "Where did you learn that crap?" And I was like,
"From you."
And he goes,
Yeah.
and he just went off on me about doing it, and I was like, what? You're the one who taught me that, like.
Yeah, I swear Fuyu Sensei taught that. That's how I found out.
But see, like that's that thing, like where Sensei like sometimes showed the Atemi, but he didn't always show the Atemi.
No.
But like, so even Fuyu Sensei did not do the Atemi every time.
No, he did not.
So, but do we need to roll the clock back, de-evolve the technique so that these people can know where the Atemi is?
I believe the Atemi is a training aid, could be a training aid, where to focus, where the path of your hand blade is, etc., things like that. How to align with your opponent's attack. Because a lot of times when you're attacking, you're not attacking from the side. You're just attacking like, boom, like you're just eating me just right off the line of fire. A lot of times when you're Atemi, the rule is in spacing, you can hit them, but they can't hit you.
Yeah.
And that's when you know your spacing is good. And then once you got that spacing in your mind palace, your mental Rolodex, you don't need the Atemi anymore because your spacing is already perfect, appropriate. Is that what you're talking about? Like when you don't use Atemi anymore?
I don't use it because my timing and spacing is pretty good, but
Yeah.
I mean, like, but teaching it, giving it to the students, are we doing them a disservice?
I don't think we are.
Just
Just like,
but you watch people do Aikido and you're like, dude, like, where was your Atemi? Right? When I see some fake Aikidoist doing, fighting against like a MMA person, and then the person's just kicking him in the leg, and I'm like, where's your Atemi, partner?
yeah, where's your Atemi?
But
Because obviously their timing and spacing subpar.
yeah, but then this person is representing Aikido, taking on an MMA fighter, and you're just like,
Yeah,
what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
But like,
So we've gone across the whole spectrum: Atemi, no Atemi, history of Aikido, Atemi. Are there, is there any sort of parting thoughts based on what we've talked about today that something you think about now that you didn't think about an hour ago?
Well, I mean, it just goes back to Furia Sensei's
Quote.
definition of Atemi. Atemi has more uses in Aikido technique than to simply strike the opponent. We use Atemi to correct our spacing and to break the concentration and balance of our opponent in order to throw or pin the opponent more easily.
It's that last phrase, right? That's killer.
Well, it's just that you really have to, before you use it or don't use it, you really got to try to understand it.
Yeah.
I believe there's a balance to everything. You can't just have complete flow, but you also just can't have Atemi, just Atemi.
Yeah.
It's got to be a balance between having a martial aspect in Aikido, but you still have this flowing aspect to it.
I think that's a really good place for us to stop.
Well, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.